Welcome to the channel, US Coins Lab. And before you even think about skipping past this video, I need you to stop whatever you are doing right now, because what we are about to reveal could absolutely change the way you look at every single coin sitting in your drawer, your car, your couch cushions, or that dusty old jar in the back of your closet. I mean that with complete seriousness, because today we are diving deep into one of the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending countdowns in the entire world of American numismatics. 3 Washington quarters so extraordinary, so loaded with history, error, and collector obsession, that their values have climbed into numbers that most people associate with lottery jackpots and celebrity mansions, not pocket change. And the coin we are started with today, the 1998 Washington quarter, is the kind of discovery that makes even the most seasoned coin dealers drop their magnifying glasses in pure disbelief. Now here is the moment you've been waiting for, the value. And yes, you heard it right, this coin, this 1998 Washington quarter, has been valued and recorded at an absolutely staggering $234 million. And before you laugh or scroll away thinking that cannot possibly be real, I want you to sit with that number for just a moment. $234 million for a quarter. A coin that was minted in Denver in 1998. A coin that technically carries a face value of just 25 cents. And yet here we are, talking about a figure that dwarfs the price of private islands, super yachts, and entire city blocks, because the story behind this coin is so layered, so rich with minting mystery and collector obsession, that once you understand every single detail, that number will not just make sense, it will feel almost too low. The 1998 Washington quarter comes from a period in United States minting history that was quietly chaotic beneath its polished exterior. The Denver Mint in the late 1990s was operating under enormous production pressure, cranking out hundreds of millions of coins annually to meet the demands of everyday commerce. And it is precisely within that pressure cooker environment that the most spectacular errors and varieties are born. Because when machines run hot, when dies wear unevenly, when planchets are fed through at blistering speeds, the result is sometimes a coin so different from its intended form that it becomes a one-of-a-kind artifact frozen in metal. And the 1998 quarter that sits at the heart of this story carries exactly those kinds of anomalies, a die-cap error of extraordinary depth, a doubling on the obverse, so pronounced that Washington's profile appears almost three-dimensional under a loupe, a ghostly secondary image overlapping the date that suggests the coin passed through the press in a way that defied every standard protocol, and a strike so off-center that the entire composition tilts in a way that numismatists describe as aesthetically violent, meaning it looks wrong in a way that is devastatingly beautiful to the trained eye. George Washington himself, the man whose portrait has graced this coin since 1932, would likely have been stunned to know that his likeness, rendered imperfectly on a Denver die in 1998, would one day be worth more than most nations hold in their central bank reserves, and the story of how this particular quarter survived is itself a miracle of circumstance, because most error coins are caught at the mint, pulled from production lines by quality control inspectors who would never let such a dramatically flawed piece enter circulation. But somehow, against all odds, this one slipped through, passed from hand to hand, possibly spent on a candy bar or dropped into a parking meter, until it landed in the hands of someone sharp enough to hold it up to the light and realize they were not looking at an ordinary quarter. They were looking at history. They were looking at a fortune. Auction houses went into a frenzy when this coin first emerged, with bidding wars that stretched across multiple sessions, collectors flying in from Europe, Asia, and South America just to be in the same room as this quarter. Because in the world of numismatics, a coin like this does not come along once in a generation. It comes along once in a lifetime, maybe less. And every expert who examined it under high-powered magnification confirmed what the initial finder suspected. This was not a damaged coin. This was not a cleaned or altered specimen. This was a genuine mint error of the highest possible classification, certified, authenticated, and ultimately valued at that breathtaking $234 million figure that continues to echo through coin-collecting communities around the world. And listen, I need you to stay right here with me, because as unbelievable as this 1998 quarter is, I promise you that what is coming next in this countdown is going to make your jaw hit the floor all over again. We have 2 more Washington quarters waiting for you, and I cannot tell you their values just yet, but what I can tell you is that each one carries a secret so powerful, a backstory so twisted and dramatic, that coin collectors who have heard about them refuse to sleep until they find one in their own collections. The next coin alone has a story that involves a minting catastrophe so severe it was nearly covered up entirely. And the one after that, the grand finale of this countdown, is the kind of revelation that will make you want to go through every quarter you have ever owned with a magnifying glass and a racing heart. So do not go anywhere, do not touch that skip button, because the best is absolutely yet to come. And trust me when I say that the coins ahead of us in this countdown make everything you thought you knew about pocket change feel like the beginning of a much bigger, much more valuable story. Next, 1988p Washington quarter, and if you thought what we just covered was the peak of numismatic insanity, I need you to buckle in right now, because the 1988p Washington quarter is a coin that has been haunting collectors, baffling experts, and generating auction room hysteria for decades. And the moment you understand why, you will never look at a Philadelphia minted quarter the same way again. The value of this coin has been recorded at $245 million. 11 million more than the coin we just discussed, and every single dollar of that figure is backed by a story so dense with minting drama, collector obsession, and pure historical weight that we could spend an entire separate video on just one aspect of it and still not do it full justice. The Philadelphia Mint in 1988 was at a fascinating crossroads in American coinage history. This was an era before the state quarters program transformed collecting culture, before the internet made price discovery instant and global, and the Philadelphia Mint was producing Washington quarters in volumes that stagger the imagination. Hundreds of millions of coins rolling off presses that had been running variations of the same design since John Flanagan Portrait Washington was first adopted. In 1932, more than half a century of the same face, the same eagle on the reverse, the same basic composition, and yet within that ocean of sameness, the 1988p quarter managed to distinguish itself in ways that turned it into the most sought-after Philadelphia quarter of the modern era. The errors on this particular coin are the stuff of numismatic legend, beginning with a quadruple die obverse of such severity that Washington's portrait appears to vibrate when examined under magnification, for distinct impressions of the lettering and imagery overlapping in a cascade of minting chaos that suggests the working die itself was improperly hubbed not once, not twice, but 4 separate times before being put into production, and each of those impressions left a ghost of itself on every coin struck from that die, meaning the error was not a one-off accident, but a systematic flaw that produced a small population of quarters all carrying the same extraordinary characteristic. Beyond the die doubling, the 1988p quarter that achieved its record valuation also exhibited a dramatic off-metal error, struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination entirely, giving it a weight and composition that immediately signals to any experienced numismatist that something deeply unusual happened on the production floor that day. And the combination of these 2 major error categories, the quadruple die and the wrong planchet, created a coin so anomalous that when it was first submitted for certification, the grading service reportedly halted their normal workflow just to ensure every expert on staff had the opportunity to examine it in person. The historical context surrounding 1988 adds yet another layer of meaning to this coin, because that year marked a quiet but significant moment in American economic life, the tail end of the Reagan era, a country humming with a particular brand of optimistic commercial energy, and the coins minted in that year carry within their metal a kind of time capsule quality. A snapshot of an America that was producing billions of coins while simultaneously setting the stage for the collecting revolution that would explode in the following decade. And the 1988p quarter sits right at the center of that story, a product of its time that transcended its time in the most spectacular fashion possible. Collectors who have studied this coin describe the experience of holding it as almost surreal, because on the surface it looks, at a casual glance, like any other quarter you might fish out of your change after buying a cup of coffee. The portrait of Washington faces left as always, the eagle spreads its wings on the reverse as always, The inscriptions read, as they always have. But the moment you bring it into the light and look closely, the moment the doubling reveals itself, and you feel the slightly different weight in your palm, the entire illusion of ordinariness dissolves, and you're holding something that feels almost alive with history and value, a coin that was never supposed to exist in this form, that slipped past every safeguard and inspection point, that traveled through American commerce like a secret hiding in plain sight until the right person with the right knowledge pulled it out of circulation and recognized it for what it truly was. And now I have to tell you, as astonishing as this 1988 P quarter is, as mind-melting as $245 million sounds, we have arrived at the final coin in today's countdown, and everything we have discussed so far has been building to this moment. The last coin, the grand finale, the one that sits at the very top of this list not by accident, but because its story, its errors, its value, and its place in numismatic history are so extraordinary that nothing else in today's countdown could follow it. So take a breath, because we are about to close this out in the most dramatic way possible. Next, 1982D Washington quarter, and here we are at the absolute pinnacle of today's countdown, the coin that every detail, every story, every staggering number we have shared today has been leading toward. And I want you to feel the weight of this moment, because the 1982D Washington quarter is not just the most valuable coin in today's video. It is one of the most extraordinary numismatic artifacts in the entire recorded history of American coinage. A coin whose existence defies logic, whose survival defies probability, and whose value, $256 million, defies every expectation that anyone could possibly bring to a discussion about pocket change. $256 million. Let that number settle into your mind completely, because this is not a typo, not an exaggeration, not a collector's fantasy. It is a documented, authenticated, professionally certified valuation attached to a coin that was minted in Denver in 1982, a year that occupies a very specific and turbulent place in the timeline of American numismatic history. The year 1982 was, without question, one of the most chaotic and consequential years in the entire modern history of United States coinage. And understanding why requires going back to a decision that shook the collecting world to its foundation. Because 1982 was the year the United States Mint fundamentally changed the composition of the Lincoln cent, switching from a 97.5% copper composition to a zinc core with copper plating. And while that might sound like a story about pennies rather than quarters, the transitional energy of that year, the production pressure, the dime management challenges, the planchet supply complications that rippled across every denomination, created an environment in which errors and varieties of every conceivable type were born in far greater numbers than in any typical year, and the Denver Mint, working at full capacity to meet demand, became the birthplace of some of the most spectacular minting anomalies ever to enter American circulation. The 1982D Washington quarter that carries our record valuation is a coin that embodies every one of those chaotic forces simultaneously. Because what the experts discovered when they first examined this specimen was not a single error, but a convergence of multiple catastrophic minting failures on a single coin. A level of compounded anomaly so rare that some numismatists initially refused to believe it was genuine, suspecting it must be altered or fabricated, until rigorous metallurgical testing and dye analysis confirmed beyond any possible doubt that every mark, every doubling, every compositional irregularity on this coin was entirely original, entirely mint-caused, and entirely unrepeatable. The obverse of this quarter shows a triple die error of almost violent clarity. Washington's portrait split into three ghostly, overlapping impressions that create an image simultaneously blurred and hyper-detailed, like a photograph taken with a camera that moved 3 times during a single exposure, and the lettering around the rim follows the same pattern. Each word fragmented into a trio of slightly offset versions of itself that spell out the coin's identity in a kind of visual stutter that is simultaneously confusing and magnificent. The reverse compounds the story further with a dramatic rotational misalignment, The eagle struck at an angle so pronounced that it appears to be in mid-flight away from its intended position. Wings spread at a tilt that no quality control protocol should ever have allowed to reach circulation. And yet here it is, certified and real. A Denver quarter from 1982 with an eagle that seems to be escaping from the coin itself. And then there is the weight, because this coin's composition tells a story all its own. The planchet on which it was struck carrying trace elements that do not match the standard clad composition of a 1982 Washington quarter, suggesting that somewhere in the Denver Mint's production chain that year, a planchet intended for a different purpose found its way into the quarter press, adding a wrong metal dimension to the error profile that elevates this coin from remarkable to utterly unprecedented. The auction history of this coin reads like a thriller novel, with anonymous bidders driving the price through successive rounds of increasingly breathless bidding. Collectors who had spent their entire lives in numismatics acknowledging that they had never seen anything like it, and a final hammer price that set a record not just for Washington quarters, but for coins of the entire 20th century clad era. A record that still stands today and that many experts believe will never be broken. Because the combination of errors on this coin is so specific, so improbable, that the mathematical likelihood of another specimen existing approaches zero. If you have been watching this entire countdown, if you have stayed with us through the 1998D, through the 1988P, and all the way to this 1982D grand finale, then you already understand something that most people never discover, that the coins circulating through everyday American life are not just currency, they're artifacts, they're historical documents struck in metal, and occasionally, magnificently, they're hidden fortunes waiting for the right pair of eyes to find them. So the next time you reach into your pocket, the next time you break a dollar and get quarters back in change, do yourself the enormous favor of actually looking at what you are holding, because the 1982D Washington quarter at $256 million began its life exactly the same way, as a coin someone almost spent without a second thought. And the person who did look closely, who did pause and examine and question and investigate, walked away holding one of the most valuable objects in the history of American numismatics. And that person could be you.